following Andrea's work since, it's been at least 5 years. The first time I heard her speak was on the Digestion Sessions, which is Sean Croxton, Underground Wellness. And her unique approach to designing individualized nutrition programs for people and actually bringing people from a state of dysfunction into function, primarily using nutrition, like blew my mind wide open. And so I reached out to her and her team asking if she would be willing to share some of that with us today. So
Awesome.
That's why you're here.
Thank you, Noah.
Yeah.
I'm glad to be with you guys. So as Noah said, my name is Andrea Nakayama, and I'm a functional medicine nutritionist. And in my business now, I grew from being a solo practitioner, having an in-person practice, to having a completely virtual practice. I have 5 nutritionists on my team located around the country. We work with people around the world. We have online programs for people, for the patient population, and then I also teach other practitioners. That's actually the biggest part of what I do in Holistic Nutrition Labs. So we have thousands of graduates in over 50 countries where I'm teaching the art and science of functional nutrition. So really taking apart the systems that I've created to help people get to those root causes, because as somebody was chatting about that I couldn't see, we can get lost in the weeds and we have to figure out how to get in there. So what I'm going to share with you today is how we do a patient history, how we do that collection of information, and I'm going to walk you through my systems. And I really welcome interaction. I want to hear your questions, what's coming up for you. I know that your scope of practice is a little bit different than mine. You've got some more hands-on work, which is really important. And also, it's important to understand how everything interrelates. That's where the functional medicine piece really comes into play. So before I move on, any questions about where I'm coming from or what we're doing? No? We're good? Okay, great. So what I'm going to do is share our functional matrix with you. Have you all seen the functional medicine matrix? Okay, so I've adapted the functional medicine matrix to work a little bit more for both the practitioner, the allied functional medicine practitioner, which is most of us who aren't the physician on the case, as well as something that can be shared with the patient, because I see that the functional medicine matrix is something that's going to be a bit overwhelming for the patient to be able to grok. So I wanted a tool that we could work with, we could work into, that would help us repeat back the story to the patient and really be collecting and engaging and connecting too. It's really important that we connect. As you likely know, patients, sick is the new norm. People are seeing multiple practitioners. When they're coming to you, they are likely seeing a number of other people for different things. They're not making the connections between their structural imbalances and their migraines, or their digestive issues and their hormone issues. And what we can do is really start to bring those pieces together and help them understand themselves better. So I'm going to go ahead and share that document with you. Here we go. Can you all see that? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So this is the functional nutrition matrix. This is the one I teach with when we're using it in our practice. It's just got different identity on it. And as you can see, there are 3 sections on the matrix. There's the section that I call the story, which is the antecedents, the triggers, and the mediators. There's the soup, which is that big flower in the middle where we start to look at the physiological function. And there's the skill, which you're going to see on the right side, where we think about what are the skills that the patient needs to put in place in order to meet their goals. So again, that's the story, the soup, and the skill. And I think of all of these pieces as true but partial. So if we're not really looking at the entire picture, we're not thinking functionally, and we're not able to really address those root causes with a more systematic approach. We're just getting lost in the symptoms. So you can grab yourself one of these matrices at holisticnutritionlab.com/matrix. So you can write that down. You can use it anytime if you want to start playing with it. You're welcome to. And I want to go over now what each of those areas really means and how we start thinking into it. So the antecedents are the genetic factors. I kind of want to come back and look at you again. So you kind of got that picture in your head? Or I guess you can still see this and now I can see you. Okay. I think that's okay. So the antecedents are all the things we're going to collect from their history, their genetics, anything they know, any of those kind of things like, did your parents have any health issues? What do you know about your familial history? All of those types of things. Their antecedents are also their gender and their age and the things that they're coming in with that we want to consider through a lens of what I call clinical empathy. So we're going to handle working with a 6-year-old different than we are a 60-year-old. And if we know things about their genetics, it's going to play into how we might be approaching the case. So the antecedents are all those genetic factors. The triggers and the mediators often get mixed up by practitioners. So I want to take a moment to talk into those and see if you have any clarifying questions there. So triggers, as we create a functional timeline, are the things in their lives that really were a tipping point for them. So they're going to share things like, I went to Mexico in 1996 and I got food poisoning and my digestion has never been the same since. We then think of that food poisoning as a trigger. And you, in taking your histories with your patients, are going to be diving in more deeply to find those triggers, because they might say something like, my digestion has been off since I was 42. And then you have to say, did anything happen around that time? What might have been the triggering events for that change in your digestion, or in your, the pain, if you're talking through a structural lens. If somebody's like, I've been in pain since this time, you can ask that question. Another good way to get to triggering events is to ask, when in your life did you feel the best? And when they say the time, oftentimes people can access that. They can say, when I was in college, before I had kids. Then you say, then what happened? Then what happened? And you keep asking the questions. And this is the way you really get them to tell their story. And having a patient tell their story and get into those details really fosters your connection, but it helps you to develop your therapeutic plan, because you have a better understanding of not just the symptom that they're coming to you with, but the person who has that symptom. So we have to understand symptoms in a terrain, I call this the epigenetics, or the 3 tiers. That symptom, those symptoms exist in a terrain. So those are the triggers. The mediators are the things that they know, or that you're going to help them define, make them feel better or worse. So whereas the trigger was maybe one of the initiating factors, the mediators are the things they have control over. This really relates to the skills section of the matrix, because somebody can say, I notice when I eat gluten, I actually have heightened pain. Or whenever I work out too hard, I'm exhausted at night. We start to really identify what are the mediators and help them identify the mediators. So can you see those differences, that distinction there? Does that make sense, the difference between the triggers and the mediators? because a lot of people have issue with that one. Okay. And can you see how you would bring somebody into their story here by asking particular questions and engaging with them and spending time in a health history? Does that make sense to be doing that? Okay, great. So when we get to the story, the soup portion of the matrix, this is where we really start to see what in functional medicine is called the web of interactions. This is where we start to see how all of these things play a factor in how the person is feeling. We can't really separate any of these areas. So even if we think of structural imbalances, what we have to recognize is that person is likely going to also have immune and inflammatory imbalances because their body is trying to address chemically the structural imbalances that are causing them pain. The structural imbalances may also cause them hormone and neurohormone imbalances. And conversely, there's going to be a connection there if there are neurological issues with an understanding and the pain receptivity. So we start to see the web of interactions. And I like to think of the butterfly that we're looking at here as the main physiological pieces. So gastrointestinal status, immune and inflammatory balance, oxidative stress and energy production. This is going to have to do with free radicals and mitochondrial function. Detoxification, really key these days. People are going to be in more pain and feel more sick when they're not able to process their environment and have that resilience. Hormones and neurohormones, and that structural integrity. So this all works together to create the internal milieu that patients are coming to us with. And the more we can start to capture what it is we know on a matrix like this, jotting down different things, then we can see the whole person, and that should inform our treatment. Certainly from a functional nutrition perspective, it does. I'm always going to start with the gastrointestinal status because it is where food meets physiology, and the same diet doesn't work for everybody because of that synergy, that symbiosis of where food meets physiology. So I'm going to capture signs, symptoms, and diagnoses on this matrix. Things like gas and bloating are going to go in the GI status. I'm going to look at histories like Epstein-Barr or tick bites or joint pain that flares or autoimmunity in the immune and inflammatory balance. I'm going to look at anything with diet history like eating oxidized oils in the oxidative stress. So I start to collect information from their history and jot it down in here so I can know a direction that I'm going to be leading them and what's priority. So any questions about the soup portion here?
It seems to me like the kind of soup portion is more of the objective findings, and then the story portion is more of the subjective findings. Is that true, or?
It could very well be. Sometimes it's hard to tease apart because even something like pain can be subjective if it's related to chemical production, neurohormone production. And so we have to sometimes tease those things apart. I have a patient I'm working with now, and I don't usually take on new patients. I let the team mostly do that and support from the back end. But he's been in pain his entire life. He's a very famous writer, and he's, angry and upset all the time. He can barely function. He's in so much pain. And I have to look at what is that pain? How does it serve him? Where is it serving his creativity? How is it actually, what is it informed by? Is it informed by a structural imbalance? Is it informed by a neurohormone imbalance? And so my job in using a document like this is to untangle. It's like every person who comes to us is a knot, and we have to slowly piece it apart. Like, what are these different pieces that are leading to what I see right here and now. And you guys have the ability to provide some potentially immediate relief. And yet, if that doesn't stick, there's reasons there. And if somebody just keeps coming back, we have to ask why. Why? What's happening here? And this helps us to see how we tease that apart. Does that make sense, Noah?
Yeah, completely. That was helpful for me.
Yeah. Any other questions about the soup portion? Are you guys working like this? Do you look at these pieces already?
Loosely. We don't spend a ton of time. Evan has a question.
Great.
You prioritize like what comes first, like what you address first.
Did you catch that?
Yep, I did. So in terms of prioritizing what comes first, for me as a functional medicine nutritionist, the GI always comes first. So I think top to bottom, how do we get digestion functional so that we can make sure that the person is getting the nutrients they need to heal? Because a lot of times people can be eating the best diet ever, and it's not the best diet for them, or there are structural imbalances internally, or there are chemical imbalances internally that aren't enabling them to utilize their nutrients. And without those nutrients, we can't do the healing we need to do. So from the soup perspective, I'm always starting with digestion and then kind of looking at what immediately needs my attention next. I won't really look at hormones and neurohormones without looking at digestive function. I can't look at immune imbalance without looking at digestion function. Same with detoxification. You have to look at digestion first. It's, there's a lot going on in detoxification that depends on a functional digestive system. In addition, I have a free primer that you can all get. It's at holisticnutritionlab.com/3 tiers. And that's the number 3 and then TIERS. And that's my epigenetic mastery primer. And that is where I explain how I work through things in order to get to those roots. So from a global perspective, what I would do first is really look at what are the non-negotiables. What can this person do or not do that's going to help them feel better or worse? So tier 1 are the non-negotiables. Tier 2 is deficiency to sufficiency. How do we make sure we're addressing deficiencies in the body? And I'll come back to that in a moment. And then tier 3 is where we start to look at where might there be infections or chronic situations that are impairing the rest of the system. But as we go forward, let's say digestion is a non-negotiable, we start to address deficiencies because we're helping the digestive system get what it needs from the nutrients instead of just coming in and addressing deficiencies. So deficiencies can be anything like secretions, not having enough hydrochloric acid in the stomach, having low enzyme production because of the foods eaten or kind of dead. So a deficiency can be something happening in the body. A deficiency could be a vitamin D deficiency or a B6 deficiency. Deficiency could be low serotonin production, all sorts of deficiencies and excesses that we start to bring into balance tier of non-negotiables, which for me is digestive function. Top to bottom, thinking about the food, so cephalic digestion to elimination. How is this person pooping? And, we talk about poop a lot. We say it's the biggest diagnostic tool we can have, and there's a lot we can learn from helping somebody speak about and track their poop. Does that help answer that where do I start question?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Because it's hard, especially with more and more complex patients. And that's really what I'm training people to do. We have an increasing population of people who are getting sicker and sicker because there's so many it's multifactorial. There's so many pieces to the puzzle that brought them to where they are right now. And again, we have to untangle it. And so the systems I've created help us to do that without getting lost in some of the crazy details. I mean, I see my students going off on tangents and researching IgM antibodies for hours. And I'm like, their IgM antibody doesn't matter. Look at these other factors that need to be addressed first. And I'm sure you guys see this from a structural perspective that is above my head, but things you would be looking at first and foremost, perhaps like in the spine, before you'd be looking at other aspects. Is there a good analogy for me there, Noah, that you can think of?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like within chiropractic, there's kind of the upper cervical and then the full spine, and all the upper cervical people believe that if you just adjust atlas, then you can affect the entire body. And so it's kind of that same analogy where you can go at it both ways, but there might be a way that's a little bit quicker or more efficient.
Yeah, and that's going to allow other alignment to happen. So what's like the, big ticket item you could go in for and then allow other things to fall into place? That's really where I go at it from. And the thing that's really exciting for me about the work that we can be doing as, allied functional medicine practitioners, no matter our scope of practice, when we're not the MD on the team, is that we can bridge the gap between what the physician is doing, which may be diagnostically related, and the person. What could they be doing for themselves that isn't just reliant on showing up for an appointment? So, a lot of patients are trained these days in just like handing over their care, and we want to give them back some of the agency. I always joke that like we live in a culture where people have like a Spotify account and get bras that are in half sizes and beds that match our body form. But with our health, patients are so ready to hand it over, and I really want to hand it back and train us as practitioners to say, what at the end of our sessions do we make sure that the patient has back in their hands that they can do all the time for themselves that works as a mediator for them, right? Whether it's taking more Epsom salt baths or doing certain stretches, what is it that becomes a positive mediator? So let's talk about skills now, because this one is tricky, because you might ask people to do exercises and they don't necessarily do it, right? They don't necessarily follow through. So they're coming back and seeing you again and again without doing their own homework. So what I say about the skills section is that we need to take into consideration all of these things: sleep and relaxation, exercise and movement, nutrition and hydration, stress and resilience, and relationships and networks. And I'm sure that you see in your work how each of these things, think about nutrition and hydration for a moment in terms of inflammation and body pain. You drink more water, you're flushing out more of those chemicals. And in addition, if you're eating a lower inflammatory diet, you're going to have less pain. So what are the skills we could be giving people to help them get out of the trouble that they're in and really find resolution? In order to do this, we need to help people connect those skills that we're asking them to employ with their end goal, with what it is that they're envisioning. So if you can imagine this for a moment, see that column that I'm calling the skills column, the one that starts with sleep and relaxation, and imagine like the front of a rocket ship that comes off the tip and goes to a point at the side. So you have like a triangle on its side with those actions at its base, right? At the tip of that triangle on the side is their goal, their outcome and vision. And at the base of the triangle are all those things that they need to do: work on their sleep and relaxation, exercise and movement, etc. What we need to do in that initial session where we're collecting their story and working with them to get the details of their life, we need to help them connect with their outcome and vision. What is it that they want for themselves? That way, when you're asking them to do something, the way you talk about it is giving them back to them in relation to their outcome and vision. So the skills you're asking them to do are connected to what they want for themselves. In a scenario like this, that tip of the triangle, that's what I would call the CEO. They're the CEO of their own life. And that base is the worker. They're also the worker. They have to do all the work day in and day out. And you are the manager. So you're helping the worker understand what they have to do to meet the CEO's objectives. And you're helping the CEO be able to speak to the worker. So you can think about it as your role as being an intermediary between two roles, but the patient holds both of those roles. Does that make sense? Can you see how that would be effective in terms of talking to somebody, identifying their goals and what they want out of their relationship with you?
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit more logistically about what this looks like in my practice, but one of the things I also want to presence is that oftentimes with patients, we have to help them understand that the road from where they are to that goal where they want to be is not a straight line, that there are going to be ups and downs. They might leave your office and feel more pain than relief. The relief might come after they do some exercises. And being able to presence that for people, because not only do people not understand their bodies anymore, but everybody's been trained to look for the quick fix. And oftentimes in the climate that we're seeing in health and medicine, there is no quick fix because there's such a complex situation happening for each individual. So helping people to understand that the road from A to B is never a straight line and that there are going to be ups and downs is going to be a really great connection point. And it's also going to help you retain your clients. Because what happens if you work on them and they go away and they're like, well, that didn't feel better. If you haven't presenced for them that this is a journey, they're going to be looking for the next pill, protocol, or practitioner as fast as they can. So it's really important that we set context for the therapeutic relationship. And when you're working on something like the Matrix, they see you capturing information, they hear you asking the right questions, they get that you care and you're making a connection. They're going to get a benefit from just even hearing you make some of the connections and ask the questions. And you start to cultivate a really therapeutic partnership, which is part of what functional medicine is all about, being in partnership with the patient. So I wanted to make sure that we presence that at the start of a relationship as well.
Cool.
Great. Any questions before I talk about logistics of how we do these things?
Well, this may be a question to lead into logistics, but when you are determining an individual nutrition plan for somebody with their own unique needs, what do you find is your most powerful tool in doing that? Is it patient history, or do you do blood testing, or?
We don't do blood testing till later. So we can do specialty functional labs, we can do regular serum labs. So let me walk you through our process a little bit. And if you wanted to, check it out, you could go to replenishpdx.com/counseling. We have a completely automated funnel for the entryway of a patient coming in to see us so that they get some education from the get-go. And when you opt in there, you won't be obliged to anything. You could just do it, just don't sign up for a strategy session. You'll still be carried through how we're speaking to people from the get-go because it's a different model. And we tend to work with what we call the big bigs. So people who have big health issues, who have already made a big effort. So that's our ideal patient. So the conversation's directed towards parsing that out. So what's going to happen is that they, super logistically, they're going to go onto the web counseling page and say, yes, I'm finally ready to feel better. And then they're going to be brought through a series of communications, which, you know, you can do in any way. It doesn't need to be automated. That's actually brand new for us. But we're going to have people take a quick survey so we know very generally how they eat, because we've got to know, do they eat gluten, dairy, or sugar? Because those are the top inflammatory foods, and we won't see anybody in our counseling fold if they eat gluten, dairy, or sugar in any, you know, if they eat like a square of dark chocolate at night, they get to bypass, you know, other systems. But if they're eating gluten, dairy, or sugar, we're going to lead them into our elimination diet, which is also automated. It's replenishpdx.com/good, or just good. The program is called Good Riddance. But they'll have to go through a 25-day elimination training, basically. Why do those things matter and how do they impact inflammation? Otherwise, they can come in to our counseling fold. So our initial session is 2 parts. We call it a premier case review. And the first part is with my intake specialist. And she takes their complete intake form, which is very, very detailed, and she starts to map that onto our version of the functional timeline. So I don't know if you guys have seen a functional timeline, but it's basically like an arrow with events happening in life and symptoms. We've expanded the heck out of that. So it's pages long, and it's capturing all of that information and their age throughout. So Katie, my intake specialist, sees them first, and she transfers over information from their intake form into the timeline, and then she has an hour-long session where she's asking more pointed questions, like I was sharing with you. When did that pain first happen? Wow, so you didn't have constipation until you were 38? It looks like that was after you had your first child, but before you had your second child. What else was happening? So she's gonna dive in and get more information and start tracking like crazy on this document, the functional nutrition timeline. We then assign that patient to their nutritionist, and the nutritionist takes the timeline and creates one of those matrices that I shared with you. So they're working off the timeline to start mapping what is it that we need to do here. And then we work as a team every week to meet in a client review meeting where they're going to get my feedback. If the person came in with labs, I'm going to review those. But oftentimes there's a lot of information that we can gather and collect before labs that comes just from tracking. So we will do a food, mood, poop tracker, and I'm giving you a lot of URLs, but if you want to see our food, mood, poop tracker, you can go to replenishpdx.com/FMP. So we do a food, mood, poop tracker for them. We'll do a supplement tracker. If they're a more advanced patient, we'll have them do a lab tracker. And you'll see all that as you go through the counseling services funnel. Those are gifts that you'll get when you opt into that replenishpdx.com/counseling. You'll see those documents. But I'm a huge fan of getting the patient to track, because as they step back and go, what's happening with me? What have I been doing? Why am I taking those supplements that like 3 different practitioners told me to take? They don't even know that they're taking some supplements that have gluten in them, or 2 supplements that have different names that different practitioners gave them that have the same nutrients. So now they're actually getting too much, especially with the B vitamins. They can't see all that. So getting them to step back allows us to move in and start to work with what's going on here. Then to answer your question, we do have a serum panel that we're going to see before we do any functional testing. So by functional testing, I mean stool analysis, organic acids, hormone testing. That's down the line after we've looked at other factors. And those factors are signs, symptoms, food, mood, poop tracking. We dial in their supplements. How do we work with their skills? And then we see a functional serum panel that hopefully their physician will run for us. It gives me very quickly some good information about how they're, what's going on there. So I'm going to open for questions in a second, but that's our 2-part Premier case review, a session with the intake specialist, a session with the nutritionist. We will wrap that up if we think we're done and we only need to see them occasionally, or if it's somebody we need to work with more aggressively and more regularly, we will then work in like a 6-session package to see them more regularly. And it's a good model for you all to adapt as well, in terms of seeing somebody regularly and you determining how regularly you need to see them to get the results that you need with them. So sitting in that seat of leadership and not leaving it up to the patient to determine that. Does that help answer that testing question?
Yeah.
Anything else coming up there in terms of the model or what's of priority for us?
I guess my question is kind of academic. Why do you think humans need such highly specialized diets as individuals where other animals, we can make a puppy chow, a cat chow, turtle chow, panty chow?
Yeah. I think it's time, I think we've really over time impacted our systems so much that people can't handle different things. We can't look at diet alone. We do need to look at that symbiosis. So why is it that somebody's going to benefit from a ketogenic diet or a low FODMAP diet? What are those determinants that we need to figure out for that individual? And they really come through those ATMs. There are those antecedents are really key because we've adjusted, particularly, I'm going to sound like a conspiracy theorist with the microbiome. The microbiome has really been taken a hit over time so that we can't even digest some of the things that the body was meant to digest anymore, and people are getting more and more compromised, and we throw environmental factors in there, and we throw genetics in there, and we throw bad eating patterns in there, and we throw immunizations and antibiotics in there. You get these terrains that are really individual and unique. The microbiota is as unique as the thumbprint, and that's where food meets physiology. There's no denying that that's where the food has to go in, break down, and be utilized. So somebody's ability to eat a lot of resistant starch, I can eat green plantains every morning and feed my microbiome, whereas somebody else can try to eat a green plantain and get bloated like they're 5 months pregnant. And it's really microbial. But we have bacteria all throughout our entire digestive system in different populations and makeups throughout the entire area from head to butt, but it's different for everybody, and that's where the food's coming in. That answer your question, or from my perspective? Yeah. So how much are you guys working with food in your practices or hoping to in your practices?
Well, I think we're all here because we want to work with food in our practices, but the school itself doesn't focus on food very much at all. We have one nutrition class, and it's super basic and mostly biochemistry focused.
Right. Yeah, I think, go ahead.
Sorry, one of our chiropractic philosophy books, our primary book, places chiropractors at odds with dietitians.
Oh. Yeah, I think it's if we shift to the functional model, it really is, there's no denying how interrelated everything is. I'm always bringing my nutrition team and my students back to the structural, because there's a lot of times that somebody is going to need some structural alignment that, like, it's not my job, but I've got to partner with other practitioners in order to bring that person into their balance. And if there's structural misalignments, like I said, there's going to be inflammation. That inflammation could lead to a higher propensity for autoimmunity. So I'm in my place of genius there, like, okay, this is autoimmunity, but I got to look at what's everything that's causing inflammation here. It's not going to just be sugar. It could be, you know, the car accident they had 3 years ago that they've actually never healed from. And so they're walking around with a biochemical response to that that's causing downstream issues. So I think partnership is really, really key. And you know, anything I can do, hopefully I gave you some good tools today. I think you'll enjoy the epigenetics primer. I do teach an entire class on the matrix called Reframe Nutrition. So if you wanted to look into that, you can go to reframenutrition.com. We do a practice session every single quarter, and we have one coming up on February 8th. So you do all the classes on your own time, and then you show up with practitioners around the world to get into little groups of 3. We have the technology, and you practice using the story, speaking into the story, the soup, and the skill. So it's a great opportunity to just think into the intake portion. And the Reframe Nutrition course includes my ebook, Functional Nutrition 101, where I give you my entire intake form. So, you know, it's pages and pages of the intake that we use here.
Yeah, I just like to say that I did the kind of intro to Reframe Nutrition, where we went into the little groups and practiced, you know, with the story and the soup, and it just changed the whole way that I thought about working with patients and, you know, getting the right answers. And it really did kind of help that funnel process, so that I was prioritizing the things that were really necessary for the patient to get better quicker.
Yeah, it's amazing, I think, for all of us as practitioners, and I saw a hand up, that we can get very lost in the quick fix ourselves. So somebody's coming in with an issue, and we just want to target that issue. And when there's a quick fix, I'm all for it. But oftentimes, it's that and more. Yeah.
So you said you teach some classes. Essentially, is that offered to just a variety of other practitioners, or do you specifically have to be a dietitian or nutritionist, and how long are those courses usually?
Yeah, so there's a variety of practitioners. When you get that epigenetics mastery primer, you'll see there's a pull down menu where I ask you what kind of practitioner you are. So we have everybody in the Holistic Nutrition Lab community, from health coaches to acupuncturists to registered nurses, dietitians, physician's assistants, NDs, MDs. It's really anybody who cares about where food meets physiology. And the conversation is really one that we are all taking into our practices. So for a lot of us, this might not be true for you, but certainly in the field of nutrition, there's no practicum. There's no, like, come into my office and see how this works. And so getting to actually think into how we actually practice is what I really think my training is about. I'm teaching through the lens of physiology, but I see physiology as a tool to give to patients to help them get better. So I teach through story and understanding how do we give the patient back their physical reality. So people are coming in with different knowledge levels. The health coach might not have had anatomy and physiology, and a nurse had a lot of it, but the health coach may be really good at the skills, and this is all new for them in the anatomy and physiology. And nurse is like, oh my gosh, I never thought about where the food meets the physiology. Never even thought about that because they're not trained in that. Same with the MD. So variety of practitioners in the coursework. And the sequence that it sort of goes is that there's the ebook, Functional Nutrition 101, which you can find at functionalnutrition101.com. That's a purchased ebook, and then we give that price off of the Reframe Nutrition course, which is a 3-part training into the story, the soup, and the skill with that quarterly community workshop. So that workshop happens every quarter, and that's about 3 hours, but the training is, I think, training's probably 5 hours on your own before doing the practice session. Then we go into the digestive intensive, which is 5 weeks. So 5 different classes, learning all about digestion. And those, I teach everything live. So people could be there live or they could listen in their own time. And then that leads into Full Body Systems, which is a 10-month curriculum. And that's where we get into the soup more. So we're looking not just at the digestive system, but also the immune system, the endocrine system, the urinary system, cardiovascular, neuro, and reproductive. So 7 systems covered over a 10-month period is the full curriculum. So that's a full year. And people come in at different levels as it's appropriate for them, where they are, what they need. And it's a very dynamic, active community. We've had thousands of digestive intensive graduates, about 500 full body systems graduates, and I now certify top level students as certified functional nutrition and lifestyle practitioners. So those are the graduates from Full Body Systems. They apply for a deeper mentorship and a really deep dive into the use of the tools and how we shift our thinking to get into the real functional nutrition perspective.
My friend Hannah Lewicki in Durango, Colorado just went through that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's a great community, really, really tight, connected, engaged, really dedicated to shifting the terrain of healthcare and understanding that the models and the systems we have, the ones that divide us so that different practitioners are not connected, the ones that don't see the patient as a whole, they're not working. And so we need a real paradigm shift. And for me, that's what Reframe Nutrition and the Matrix are all about. It's about the paradigm shift.
Yeah, powerful.
Yeah, great. You guys, thanks for spending your lunch with me.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming in. Really appreciate it.